Beaming out across the galaxy, this is where conspiracy on the wild side meets the perspective of a lifetime. This is the Free Zone with your host, Freeman.
Hello and welcome to the Free Zone. Well, wow, guys, it just doesn't end. The psychological warfare is coming at us over and over. Weaponized psychology. It's like we're living in an episode of 24, Jack Bauer. This life has gotten as strange as it can possibly get, but yet we know it's going to get weirder. And so tonight we're going to talk about the global Gestapo. What is it about? What is it for? Why all this social engineering? What is it leading to? We're going to talk tonight with Dr. Eric Karlstrome. Now, he's an emeritus professor of geography from Cal State University. And tonight we are going to get into Gog's new Gestapo, which really stands for Global Organized Stalking, Neuro-Warfare Groups, Electronic Surveillance, Slavery, Tracking, Targeting, Torture, Terrorism, Tyranny, and Psychological Operations. So hold on to your seats, folks, because this is going to blow your mind. Dr. Eric Karlstrome, please, welcome to the Free Zone.
Well, thank you, Freeman. And that was a great introduction, and you got the whole thing out. Gog's new Gestapo. Yeah, that's my acronym. Of course, being an academic type, 30 years in the university professor role, I guess I tend to be a little wordy. Others have called it, other things like just organized gang stalking or electronic torture and harassment, mind control. One is tech, the electronic concentration camp. We could call it the New World Order Gestapo. We could call it the NSA DHS Global Gestapo. But yeah, this is huge, and I've studied it now intensely. I am a targeted individual, so I've studied it academically. I've studied, the books and the videos, etc., that I could find that I think are credible. I've studied it from the point of view of being a target, and then, of course, I have worked with many others who have experienced targeting and written their stories, etc. So. I think I've had this website, gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com, for a couple years, and it's just growing by leaps and bounds. I had one or two posts almost every day, and this grew out of my 911nwo.com website, which is also huge. Both of these are basically digital libraries of free information that I, as an educator, want to provide to fellow citizens who are trying to figure out what's going on, because we live in this, kind of totalitarian propaganda system and media system, which, just reinforces the big lie, what the Nazis called worldview warfare, which I think is something like Weltanschauungskrieg. So we have so many big lies. 9/11 was done by Osama bin Laden, big lie. The war on terrorism, which comes, out of that and many other things, big, big, big lie. Man-caused global warming, big, big, big lie. This is all worldview warfare meant to, kind of intimidate and coerce the population into submission. 2 and 2 equals 5, right? If it doesn't, if you don't agree, then, we'll put you on the terrorism watch list, and, you'll find yourself a targeted individual. That kind of intimidation, that's explicit terrorism against the domestic population. And of course, it's also implicit terrorism, because if you see that people like me are targeted for speaking out, you might say, oh gosh, I better keep my mouth shut, So yeah. It has a chilling effect on the population, and it's intended to do that. And so the approach that I've taken, Freeman, is to look at this thing really more or less academically and historically, and see what the ingredients are, where they come from, how long these programs have been in effect, and kind of build it from the bottom up based on these ingredients. And what I've come up with, and what I'd like to share today, if you'll allow me, is what are the main functions of Gog's new Gestapo, for the ruling elite, for the New World Order, for the deep state, whatever you want to call them. Why do they do this? I now think that it's a multi-trillion-dollar global enterprise. And you can call it the national security enterprise, the national security establishment. You can call it the military intelligence, government, corporate, police state, national security state, international banking mafia complex. You can call it a host of things, but what does it do for them? And why are they pouring this? I mean, the Pentagon's another $22 trillion in debt. And of course, the Pentagon's right at ground zero of all this, the Department of Death. And we support it. So if the American people can understand what the DOD and the CIA and the NSA and the DHS are doing, we might think about cutting off the funding. Why should we support these organizations to target, terrorize, torture, and kill American civilians who have done nothing wrong? I mean, this is all extra legal. It's all covert. It's all using very, very high technologies. So this is what I'd like to get into tonight or today. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I guess just to start at the today, this idea, aren't you shell shocked? This is all of us, really. We're sitting in this traumatized state. And we just had this Gamergate, Electronic Arts Madden NFL tournament going on with live shooter coming in, shooting up this Chicago pizza in Jacksonville, Florida. And of course, we have all the same earmarks. We have live shooter drill going on, which was they tried to cover that up. It came out on a local news report. I have it in my Twitter feed that there was a live shooter drill going on. Surprise, surprise, during the live shooting. And then, of course, the shooter taking himself out as usual. Now, this, to me, looks like another clear example of psychological warfare, traumatizing people into action.
Absolutely. And the trauma-based mind control involved here is directed at that particular poor individual who has, probably been victimized by this very program, which is a derivative of the CIA's MK Ultra mind control programs, which we can talk about a little bit. But the trauma-based mind control is directed not only at individuals, like targeted individuals, it's also directed at the populace, at the mass mind. And it has been. I mean, this is what the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations began studying immediately after World War I. This was their mandate. Let's look at shell-shocked soldiers, that's post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD is what we call it now. They used to call it shell shock from being in war. And this is a normal, response to extreme trauma for an adult. Let's look at shell-shocked soldiers and figure out not how to cure them, but how to induce the same symptoms and pathology in individuals when we want to, and in the mass mind. This was the mandate of the Tavistock Institute, which was a spinoff of the Psychological Warfare Division of the British Army under Sir John Rawlings Rees, who is a general, and a psychologist. So, and of course, the CIA took its cues when it began in the OSS right during World War II from British MI6 and Tavistock. So, the British and American empires are merged now. It's the Anglo-American Empire and the Israelis in there too. You could call it, all this is to advance the Anglo-American Israeli Empire and its march towards a total full spectrum dominance of the planet, involving the full spectrum dominance of the human domain, as per the Jade Helm drills of 2015 and the UX drills of 2016. Now, UX stands for unconventional warfare. So really what we're dealing with here is unconventional warfare against individuals, against groups that are designated. This is the military industrial corporate complex getting a lockdown, social engineering, as you mentioned the term, to make sure that the society stays in order and that they can get away with whatever they want to get away with, so that there's not going to be any meaningful pushback, so that we're all going to go along with terrified submission.
Exactly. So let's figure out. I know you have laid it out what this weaponized psychology is leading towards.
Yeah, let me quote Dr. Ronnie Kilda to begin with. She was a brilliant lady, and may she rest in peace. She was killed by this program after 30 years of being targeted. She died in 2015, and she was the chief medical officer of Finland, northern Finland, Lapland, and holds various degrees in medicine. And she actually wrote papers about this kind of thing. In her book, which was published posthumously, called Bright Light on Black Shadows, published in 2015, she says, now get this is very key because she throws so much into this short paragraph. This, and now she's talking about the GOG's New Gestapo, Global Organized Gang Stalking Operations, is the most important policy of the United States. With this invisible and silent weapon, now she's going to describe it, they can control people and populations, biological and electronic systems via space satellites. The elite have plans to get rid of 2/3 of the world's population, as per UN Agenda 21, with electromagnetic warfare, chemical warfare, and psychological warfare. Mind control MK is listed as a, quote, non-lethal weapon by the military and is a weapon of mass destruction along with nuclear bombs. This technology links, now this is really important, this technology links the brains of people via implanted microchips to satellites controlled by ground-based supercomputers. Okay, this is all invisible directed energy stuff. I mean, these are wavelengths and frequencies of energy of the electromagnetic spectrum that we can't see, so it's invisible. And they don't need microchips anymore. They can use just the nanotech, which is in our brains by virtue of all the chemtrailing over the years, which have all this tiny nano particles in our brain, which then can act as a receiver. So they can turn our brains into a receiver for signals coming from satellites, which are bounced off the satellites and the cell towers and the mobile platforms from these conscious supercomputers. According to CIA director in 1972, mind control means a world where every thought, emotion, observation, and need is controlled. Well, obviously, this runs completely in the face of the U.S. Constitution, which says that the American people own the nation, and that when the government fails to provide for our, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that it's our responsibility to alter or remove that government. Obviously, the criminal elite, which has taken control of government, has plans to take out the populace, piecemeal, and to use them, in these targeting programs, for non-consensual experimentees. We talked about this last time we did an interview, Freeman. And but this is the big picture. She lays it out in that one sentence. So ultimately, the system now is being run by the quote unquote interagency, which combines in the United States, our intelligence, 17 intelligence services, and the military, state, and police, and corporate and non-governmental organizations, all these combined. And this is all laid out in various books if people want to read it. I think the best one that gives an overview is Mark M. Rich's book of 2011 called New World War, Revolutionary Methods for Political Control. Another one is Dana Priest and William Arkin's 2011 book, Top Secret America, The Rise of the New American Security State. Another one is John W. Whitehead's 2013 book, A Government of Wolves, The Emerging American Police State. Another one is Tim Sharrock's 2008 book, Spies for Hire, The Secret World of Intelligence Outsourcing. And then finally, Shane Harris's 2010 book, The Watchers, The Rise of America's Surveillance State. So I'm not making this up. I mean, we can document all this, and we can find the patents for these quote unquote non-lethal directed energy weapons and the mind control technologies which are being used against the people of the world now, because this is a global problem. And we can look at the programs, we can look at the way they've changed the laws over the last 20, 30 years to make these things legal And of course, they're not legal because all of these are fly in the face of the U.S. Constitution. And Madison versus Marbury of 1803 says all laws repugnant to the Constitution are null and void. So, and that's the law of the land. So strictly speaking, all, the Patriot Act and the National Defense Authorization Act and all these executive orders that, Obama and Bush and whatnot have passed surreptitiously to nullify the effect of the U.S. Constitution. All of these are illegal. Remember, everything that Hitler did in Nazi Germany was also legal because they changed the laws to make them legal. So we as a populace have to really get back on top of our government and make the point over and over again and make it stick that the U.S. Populace owns the government and not the other way around.
Absolutely. And much of what you're talking about actually could fall under this new Space Force heading.
Yes, that's right. And cyber warfare. They have many new things. They often call it now information operations. Information operations has everything to do with removing information that the state doesn't want you to have. Could be the truth about, say, 9/11, and then inserting misinformation instead. So this can be done in an individual's mind. And the Soviets figured this out back in the 70s and 80s with their psychotronics. They had a system very much like what we're implementing now, where they took the enemies of the state, they bombarded them with these electromagnetic wavelengths that essentially drive them crazy, and actually have the capacity to remove information from the brains and then replace it with false information. So information warfare can mean anything from inserting, misinformation in news stories, which has been done as called, propaganda for a long time, but can also operate on the level of the human brain. And it is being deployed in that manner. So, the space operations you're talking about, the cyber warfare, which, is being ramped up. I mean, all these things operate together to make this, to make neuro warfare the warfare of the 21st century. That's the game. And, there's statements by various military leaders saying, well, whoever perfects this system first will have an incomparable advantage in terms of global domination. So that's one of the reasons why the military and the government justifies the targeting of innocent American civilians, because, hey, we got to get this done so that we can beat the Russians. Blah, blah, blah. But I think that's the justification. That's always, I think, been spurious because, in this Frank Church Senate hearings in the 70s, when the CIA's top secret mind control programs were being exposed for the first and last time, CIA Director Richard Helms admitted that while the CIA always used the excuse that, well, we had to keep up with the Russians and the Chinese and the Koreans and blah, blah, blah to do these mind control programs, we were actually ahead of them always by at least 5 years in mind control. And I think that's the case now. In fact, I think if you look deep at the deep state, you see it controls the various nations. So this apparent competition gives them the excuse to pour national resources into perfecting these technologies, which can be used then against all the people of the world. So again, there's lots and lots of misinformation going on. Very, very difficult to, tell what's really happening sometimes. But this is the system we're analyzing. Obviously, we're gearing up for war against Iran. I mean, that's been scripted now since 2001 and 2000 with the Project for a New American Century, and all these wars in the Middle East, which were, predicated on the fact that the Muslims did 9/11, which is another one of these gigantic, worldview warfare lies, which justifies this phony war on terrorism, which justifies this multi-trillion-dollar industry, this military police state lockdown on the globe, and the pursuit of all these wars in the Middle East that, let's face it, that benefit Israel, and their goal of creating a greater Israel from, historic goal of creating a greater Israel from the Nile on the one side, on the other, and then, expanding from there. So, yeah, I mean, there's just so many lies, and, we really, as a population, we need to we need to call them to task on this. And this is what I try to do with my websites, which again are 911nwo.com, gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com. I have actually three more. One's naturalclimatechange.org. Another one is San Luis Valley Waterwatch.com. And then my music website is erickarlstrome.com. And I spent 30 years as a geography professor and retired in 2011. And this is what I've done. I mean, this is, as an educator, I feel like, this is my platform now. Instead of having a classroom, I put the information on the websites, and then I do these kinds of interviews to try to get the information out. And, I just have the power of one, but then when combined with your power and influence and others, then we can actually make some headway. I have that faith, so that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, Freeman. I'm sure it's the same with you and many, many others.
Yeah, absolutely. And this organization that you're describing is what the world is now calling the Illuminati, which is such a misnomer and leads people straight away from all of this, because they're looking for some sort of group that, I don't know, practices witchcraft or something on that level. But the truth is that each of these organizations you've discussed does practice ritual magic in some way, shape, or form. CIA coming up out of Skull and Bones, the Nazis coming up out of the Thule Society, and of course Kabbalism in the Israeli situation. We definitely have a situation here where it's far stranger than people think, but even this straightforward knowledge of who they are, what they're up to, and how these operations work, including the patents and everything else, is still beyond most people to understand the level that we're at war already, because everybody's gearing up for some sort of armed assault and not realizing the war is happening right around them at all times.
That's a very good point. But yeah, your point about the the occult and its place in all this is very important. If you don't mind, let me just work back to that and say that the interagency, which I just described, also works in collaboration now with, according to the Kay Griggs interviews and Dr. Ronnie Kilda's information in her book, works with a group called the Organization, the Syndicate, the Firm, the Brotherhood, which is basically an historic alliance between the mafia and military intelligence, corporate academic system. This surfaced during the Iran-Contra scandal of the 1980s. It was the drugs for arms scandal. So, yes, it's the interagency, but it's also interagency as collaborating with a criminal syndicate, which is global, and probably goes right up to the top financial sector of the planet, the banksters, as they're sometimes called. And, that's when you can bring in, terms like the Illuminati and the Illuminati program for world conquest, which was laid out in Bavaria in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt for the Rothschild family. And, in collaboration with a very particularly satanic group of Frankist Jews. And we are talking about the implementation of the Kabbalah, which is a system of black magic, perhaps the blackest satanic magic ever to be on the planet, which is thousands of years old. So this Kabbalistic black magic does infuse these secret societies, like you say, the Thule Society, the Masons for sure is all about this. And the Masons are kind of a blind for all these other secret societies like the Rosicrucians and whatnot. So, the hardest thing to wrap your head around, for me to wrap my head around, this has secular and spiritual dimensions and applications and implications. And it's very, very difficult for most of us to kind of sort that out. I have kind of being, a geography professor at a university, I've tended to go obviously for the secular institutional type research, but I've had to move into this occult spiritual aspect. There does seem to be a real dark satanic element Well, for instance, trauma-based mind control used in the Illuminati kinds of mind control, which the Nazis perfected in the concentration camps, which the CIA brought over to America with the Nazis in Operation Paperclip and perfected in their MK Ultra, Project Bluebird, Project Artichoke, MK Search, MK Delta, MK Off, and right on down the list. All these top secret mind controls programs, they heavily rely on trauma-based mind control, which is satanic ritual abuse. And early on, it always involved, well, usually involved the satanic ritual abuse of children under the age of 6, who, of course, when a child is subject to extreme trauma, they don't do what a soldier does. Soldier goes into post-traumatic stress syndrome. No, a child splits off, actually checks out. He or she removes themselves almost from the body and splits off another personality in order to save themselves from this horrendous trauma. So this then becomes the basis by which Kabbalistic and Nazi and CIA programmers can traumatize a child, create multiple personalities. Now they call it dissociative identity disorder. And then with each, and they can name each of these personalities, and they can give it a function, and they can figure out ways to trigger the personality structure into that personality. And so they now can be used as a weaponized platform. They can be a slave. They can be a super soldier like Jason Bourne. They can be a sex slave like Marilyn Monroe. They can be a courier. They can be a super spy. And in fact, this is really what I want to talk about today. This is one of the main things that I'm still wrapping my brain around, Freeman. There's a book in 2007 by Marshall Thomas. It's called Monarch, the New Phoenix Program. Now, Monarch is the operational use of the MK Ultra mind control research by the military and other corporations. Okay, we can now program a human being like a computer. And the Phoenix program was a program in Vietnam that was used to target and neutralize and often eliminate, torture, etc., members of the civilian population in Vietnam, which weren't going along with the program, which was the United States was going to invade and take control and take the resources. So if they resisted, they were called insurgents, and then the CIA identified the people that they thought were influential, and then they sent the military out to wipe these guys out. And this is what happened at, with Lieutenant Calley at the My Lai massacre, and I'm sure thousands of other examples. I mean, there were something like 50,000 civilians in Vietnam that were killed by the Phoenix program in the late 60s and 70s. And so what Thomas is saying here now is that, okay, we're doing a Phoenix program now in the United States. The intelligence agencies are now the Department of Homeland Security, the DHS, in cooperation with the FBI, the Joint Terrorism Task Forces, at their fusion centers, are identifying people to put on the terrorism watch list and other watch lists. Okay, it's about 3 million of us, because I'm sure I'm on it, because I've documented my targeting. But but one of the ways that they neutralize and discredit and profile and everything these targets, one of the things that I think they can do with the electromagnetic weaponry they have, the non-lethal weapons, they can actually do this kind of programming, this Monarch programming, electronically now. So they don't need to have the trauma-based mind control inflicted on children age 6 and less. They can do it electronically in a very short time. This is what the Montauk program of the 80s proved. So then the suggestion here is by Marshall Thomas in his 2007 book, Monarch, the New Phoenix Program, is that, well, I'll read what he says. It's a good quote, and it these guys are often more eloquent than I am. Here's excerpt from his book, Monarch, the New Phoenix Program. Marshall Thomas says, "The Vietnam War was the formative experience for a generation of CIA and military intelligence personnel involved in the Phoenix program. They viewed the military defeat in Vietnam as a betrayal on the home front. a loss of will by domestic political enemies, not a military failure against a nationalistic revolution fought as a guerrilla war. The Phoenix program, assassinating suspected VC Viet Cong sympathizers in a systematic manner, worked well and is the blueprint for the current black operation, also known as gang stalking or Gog's New Gestapo, targeting thousands, I would say millions, of loyal Americans using state-of-the-art microwave and radio frequency radiation weapons. The motivation to suppress domestic dissidents, and to assassinate loyal American opposition stems from the perception of dissent against the war as treason. This philosophy is stated very clearly in the Mind War 1980 paper written by Lieutenant Colonel Michael Aquino. Aquino is the guy, he's in the military, and he founded the Temple of Set, which is a, satanic cult. So, there's the connection, another one of these millions of connections between what's going on here and Satanism. He also presided over a whole pedophilia scandal at the Presidio, which is a government-owned facility in San Francisco, where and he was accused of raping pedophilia children, lots of them associated with this program. So we're talking real scum of the earth type people doing scum of the earth type things on our taxpayers' money. I'm going back to Marshall Thomas's words here. The Department of Defense has a huge stake in futuristic technology that kills by ionizing and non-ionizing radiation, leaving little or no trace. The indiscriminate killing of the Phoenix program continues on American soil. The terms soft kill, slow kill, and silent kill refer to the new way of killing the enemy in conflicts short of war and in small wars of the future. This is also, the government now has many, many euphemisms for this, including unconventional warfare, asymmetrical warfare, military operations other than war, civil military operations, low intensity conflict. Put them all together and they're the same thing. They're terrorism against the domestic population. The counterinsurgency doctrine, we could talk a whole show about that, which the CIA developed in the 50s to conquer all these countries around the world, has now been applied to the home front so that the perceived betrayal of the military in Vietnam will not be repeated. And he says the generation of CIA and military intelligence led by, here are the names, drum roll please, Ted Shackley, Richard Helms, CIA director, William Casey, Major John Singlaub, Richard C. Cord, Major John B. Alexander, Colonel Michael Aquino, Paul Vallely, and others have built the perfect beast using selective assassination that leaves no trace. The ability to cull the human herd with silent kill technology allows a few personalities to remake the entire society in their own image, which means no more dissent. Of course, without dissent, you don't have democracy. And then he goes on, extremely low frequency ELF technology slowly drives the target crazy with silent sound, similar to the CIA MK Ultra psychiatrist Dr. Ewan Cameron's psychic driving technique. We could talk about that too. Used to break down the target's personality. The new buzzwords at the Pentagon are, quote, synthetic telepathy, also known as voice to skull or V2K, and psychotronics. Another means of attack on targets is the Smirnoff patent that uses subliminal suggestion to manipulate human behavior. This patent was purchased by the remote viewing company SciTech Corporation. Military intelligence officers involved in developing these, quote, non-lethal weapons, which can be tuned up to lethal, of course, also control SciTech. Emotional manipulation is accomplished using Dr. Michael Persinger's work. You can see that on YouTube, to remotely project emotional states that the brain entrains or locks onto and emulates. One can broadcast rage or fear at an individual target to manipulate and control them. As if these methodologies were not enough to torture and murder people, add to this nightmarish toolbox active gang stalking, which of course is psychological warfare, gaslighting, all kinds of terms for that, street theater. CIA created cults, we can go on about that, and other cause-oriented groups are used by actively harassing them in public, or harassing targets in public, in neutralization techniques described in counterintelligence operations manuals that are aimed at enemy targets. By the way, also out of MK Ultra came the Kubark manual, the enhanced interrogation or torture manual of the CIA in 1962 and 1985. And those techniques are used at Guantanamo Bay and Abu Ghraib and at these internment centers all over the world, and are used against targeted individuals. So we're dealing again with refined torture techniques which can be applied electromagnetically now. Final paragraph: in the race to develop a new weapon that has always been necessary to test it on human beings. Why do we need targets? Well, for target practice. Perfecting the latest weapons designed to kill slowly and silently, as well as perfecting the process of controlling the human mind, are no different. Once the weaponry has been perfected on these few thousand, I'd say millions now, the same techniques will be applied en masse to the general population and then to humanity as a whole. Okay, that gets us back to Dr. Ronnie Kilda's statement that, hey, the government has signed on to UN Agenda 21 plans to reduce the human population by 2/3. And the military has signed on, and the Forest Service and the Park Service and virtually all departments of the government are on board with this Agenda 21, which was never discussed by Congress, or the voting population was never informed about it. But we've been subscribing to this since 1992 as a nation, along with about 185 other nations. So, we need to wake up as a population and take our country back.
Absolutely. And the hardest part is not knowing whether your emotions are your own. And
or thoughts. Yes.
Or thoughts. And we've had this massive rise in suicide, especially suicide by doorknob. And it's almost as if it's the new identifying marker, like the Colombian necktie, to find you hanging by your doorknob. And there's been so much suicide, and suicide is in the news and constantly, and our icons are falling left and right, and we're just getting all of this. And then I wanted to add one more thing, just that I might be getting gang stalked at this very moment, Dr. Karlstrome. I am sitting here feeling overheated. I feel like I'm being microwaved from the inside out. I can't seem to stop yawning, and my eyes are just tearing up. And I have no cause for this, unless maybe it's a weed allergy. But the more we talk, the worse I'm feeling. And
oh, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm a soldier in this. I'll take it. But man, I felt that a lot in Austin, Texas, when I was doing the shows early on. And I would sit there while I was doing a show and suddenly feel as if I was being microwaved and start to just pour sweat and feel just, microwaved is the only way I could ever describe it.
Well, all I can say is I have felt the same thing. I've done a lot of interviews that I've posted on my website. And in interviews I've done on the Kev Baker show, in particular, on the one I did on 9/11 last year, oh boy, I could hardly talk. I was down to 1/20th of my strength. My mind could barely function, and my voice was as weak as a kitten. And that show's on there. People can listen to it. And, I think I was coherent, but I didn't say what I was not nearly as coherent and as strong as I normally am. And on a number of the interviews that I've done with Romola D, we've now got a series called Global Gestapo. You can see my face turn just almost beet red, and I feel flushed. And it's and of course then our computers are often hacked and interfered with at the same time. So you have this cyber stalking, cyber hacking, microwaving going on. I've been microwaved and assaulted in my home, knocked off my feet, made sick for a month, made weak as a kitten, so I had to crawl to the bathroom for a month. So yeah, these technologies are out there. And going back to your comment about suicide, we had a very, very bright young man in our little tiny community of Crestone, Colorado, 1,500 people. He was going to be the valedictorian at the local high school. He committed suicide, and this unfortunately is the goal of Gog's new Gestapo, is to drive people over the edge incrementally over time. They profile you. They find out your psychology. They find out your friends. They try to isolate you. They deprive you of all human support. They do these psychological operations against you. They give you negative messages all the time, that you're worthless, et cetera, et cetera. They ramp it up with the gang stalking, and then they ramp it up some more with the electronic weapons. And then they're always monitoring this. And we can talk about how it's done. I mean, I think it's pretty well known now. They're using military technology like C4ISR, which all the service branches use, which stands for Command, Control, Computers, Communication, Intelligence, Surveillance, and Reconnaissance. This is how they coordinate these operations. Using the street stalkers, which are, criminals using their little iPhones to obey orders and get maybe some money out of this. And then using the special forces operations guys, ex-military, ex-police, who are out there, coordinating things. And then, also the individual will often be hooked up through these satellites and supercomputers to the CIA and DIA hive mind teams, who are neuroscientists being paid to, map your brain. And we can talk about that too. You are a non-consensual human experimentee. You're being tested. You're testing military hardware. They're testing military hardware on you. They're testing their targeting system. They're perfecting their secret army, which is being built up in the process. And they have, the neuroscience and technology industry is $175 billion a year industry, according to Dr. James Giordano, who gave a lecture at Lawrence Livermore Lab in 2017 that I've transcribed and put on my website. And he lays it out. Basically, it's a confession. We're doing this, and we need viable targets. And here's how we select them. And here's what we use them for. I mean, this is all coming out. A guy named C.J. Grisham, who is, ex special ops guy, counterintelligence, ex-Army guy, did a short video where he describes what's going on in Texas, and how he, his group, and how he would have operated to neutralize targets and groups. I also transcribed that. So this is a multi-tiered system. So we get back to Dr. Ronnie Kilda's statement. This is the United States' most important program. And we have enlisted virtually the entire society. We've criminalized the entire society because gang stalking is a felony in every state. And of course, it's a violation of an individual's constitutionally guaranteed rights. So it's actually treason. It's not only a felony, it's treason. And if that felony, if the individual, the target, commits suicide, well, all those people who harassed that individual, leading him or her up to suicide, guilty of murder. So, we have criminalized the society. We have satanized the society because this program is so evil. So, we've got to exercise this. We've got to expose this and exercise it. Because like you say, suicide rate is off the chart. Good people are committing suicide for, no good reason. They're being harassed. And of course, some of those people are going to, go over the edge and lash out and, commit a murder or several. And they will become, the next shooter at somewhere, So this fuels the whole false flag terrorist operation, because some of these people are going to go over the edge and start killing others, like Myron May and Aaron Alexis and all these guys. The guy who shot up the Navy Yard, he had a rifle, he carved on them, "This is my ELF weapon." So people are understanding what's happening, but they are still driven to the edge sometimes, and they go overboard. They kill themselves, they kill others, they commit an antisocial act, or they complain of hearing voices and being followed by 100 people, and they go to the police or they go to a psychologist, and the psychologist looks at the Statistical and Diagnostic Manual number 4, DSM. He's hearing voices. Well, he's schizophrenic. He's delusional. Oh, he's got 100 people following him. He thinks, well, he's schizophrenic, delusional. Better lock him up. So we institutionalize this person, just like they did back in the Soviet Union. This is called the psychiatric reprisal. So now you take the political enemies of the state, you target them with these technologies, and you get them classified as crazy. You get them locked up, or you get them locked up in the police station. If you're a targeted individual, do not go to the police. Do not go to a psychiatrist or a psychologist, because they are waiting there to lock you up. That's the program. That's how pernicious the program is. This is a way of taking out people, taking people out, taking good people out.
I'm not going to be able to continue.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I don't know. I'm going to blame it on what we're discussing.
Yeah, well, that's quite possible.
I'm pouring with sweat at this moment.
Oh my!
My
Okay.
eyes. I feel like I'm about to vomit.
Okay.
And like I know I wasn't feeling this bad when we started, and the more we talk, and I'm gonna blame this on electronic gain stalking. I'm gonna think that my computer is looking at me right now and they're watching everything. But I feel like I'm about to vomit. I'm pouring in sweat, and this is crazy. I don't have any explanation for this.
Well, thanks for your efforts. Why don't we stop it here, Freeman? And why don't you just move, get up, move around, go outside. If you are being electromagnetically targeted, one of the things you can do to defend yourself is to move around. So let's just continue this some other time. And thank you for your efforts.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about this.
We still have a short program. Is that right or not?
Oh yeah. No, I want to continue, and we'll if you can pick up another hour this week, I would happily continue and see if this happens again.
Yeah, let's try it again. Yeah, you just email me and let me know when works for you, and I'll try to be there. Okay.
Okay. I really apologize.
No apologies needed.
All right.
Okay.
Okay. I'm gonna walk.
Yeah, walk. Okay. Bye.
Okay, guys. It is now 2 days later. Now, the motto of this show is "Wonder without fear," as you'll find on the T-shirt. But honestly, I'm a little trepidatious about getting back on the air with Dr. Eric Karlstrome. So 2 days ago, I was making this interview, got super nauseous during the interview, strangely nauseous. And once I left the microphone, once I jumped in the shower, I went and laid down. But the symptoms subsided. There was no illness. There was nothing that I can say that caused this. And what was really strange was that the very next day, Clyde Lewis of Ground Zero, you guys are probably familiar with him. I've been on his show a number of times, and he's been here. Clyde Lewis tweeted yesterday, "Oh my God, you guys aren't going to believe what happened. I just got super nauseous on the air, and then my computer network crashed and failed, and I can't complete the show." That was yesterday, in between the 2 days that we've had with Dr. Karlstrome. Now, look, no one believed me when I came out about Anna Nicole, and they all told me, "Oh, Freeman, don't worry about this stuff. It's not that big of a deal. You're talking about monarch mind control on the air, so what?" And these were the awakened people that were around me in Austin, Texas, when I was on the television show. These were the people that were supposed to be my peers, that understood the situation that I was in, and they were all blowing it off. Now, telling people about being a targeted individual is just the same, because I was trying to explain to these friends that I am most likely targeted in this situation, and they just tell me I'm crazy, tell me, "Oh, don't worry about it." Now, same thing with this bizarre nausea that came over me for the show. Half the people said, "Oh, go have a cup of tea and just feel better." And the other half, now to compare this to the Anna Nicole story and how dangerous it is to even include people in these discussions, is that then if they believe you, they don't want to be around you. Okay, so I was busy exposing mind control at the Anna Nicole story 11 years ago, and my roommate saw the fear that I had in my soul while putting this out on the air. Because this was the first, folks. No one had talked about this yet. not live on the air like this. And it was happening right then and there. So taking on these satanic forces directly at the moment that it was happening. And my roommate moved. All right. He left. So realize that when you are a targeted individual, you don't know it. You can give yourself any excuse that you have for whatever the nausea was. I could come up with reasonings for it, but I don't have any, honestly. And if I tell people about it, they either pass it off saying, oh, get a cup of tea, or they go, oh my God, I can't hang around with you. This is way too frightening. I want to leave your reality. And they do. So that is the plight of the targeted individual. And we're going to pick up this conversation with Dr. Eric Karlstrome now, and hopefully I'll make it through. So again, let's welcome Dr. Eric Karlstrome to the show. Thank you for returning. I should thank myself for having the courage to sit back down in this chair. I'm ready to get myself a wire mesh screen grounded and put it over my head. I don't know why I didn't. It's because you just don't know, do you, Eric? You're left in this position of, is this real? I know it's real. I'm talking to you, you know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, our interview on Tuesday was disrupted when you got very too ill to persist. And as I mentioned on that interview, I mean, this has happened to me also, and other people that I've talked to. This is a new reality that we live in, where the American people and indeed all the civilians of the world, have kind of been reclassified by their governments as enemy combatants or potential enemy combatants, and can be put on these various watch lists like terrorism watch lists, and can be targeted in all manners of ways using very, very high tech military non-lethal weapons, as they call them, although these electronic weapons can be tuned up so that they are quite lethal. I'm afraid the reality is, Freeman, that the United States of America, with the largest military budget and largest military in the history of the world, has weaponized virtually everything. We've weaponized the atmosphere. We've weaponized the earth, with HARP and induced earthquakes, and we can steer the weather. We can juice up hurricanes and steer them. We can knock them down, create floods and droughts by by HARP and other means that use these directed energy weapons and extremely low frequencies, etc. And now it would appear that we have also weaponized the population. We've weaponized the society in this gang stalking system, which I've been trying to understand. And my gang stalking mindcontrolcults.com website is now a little over just about 2 years old. And it, like I said last time, it's been growing by leaps and bounds as I do more research on this and try to come to grips with this reality, which actually goes back quite a ways. And I've been able to trace it back, to the Soviet Cheka and Red Terror of the Soviet Union, in the early part of the 20th century, right through the East German Stasi and the Nazi Gestapo, right into the United States FBI's COINTELPRO in the 50s through the 70s, into the CIA's MH Chaos and Phoenix program, and down the list of these um, really totalitarian, authoritarian governments' attempts to kind of police the street level using civilians and the not only the private sector but the military and the police, et cetera, to create these kind of draconian military police state systems. And I would suggest now that this new world order draconian police military state has descended on us without our knowledge and permission globally. And so that's why I call this Gog's new Gestapo, and or as you pronounced it, Gog's new Gestapo, a global organized gang stalking, neuro warfare, that's mind warfare, electronic surveillance, slavery, tracking, targeting, torture, terrorism, tyranny, and psychological operations, all directed against the domestic population in order to subdue it, subjugate it, make sure it stays in line and goes with the program. So those who, maybe exercise a little too much freedom of speech for the comfort of the powers that be that really own the country and the nation and the world, um, they get summarily and secretly placed on these lists, and bogusly, because these are individuals who have not committed any crime. But there are about 3 million on the terrorism watch list in America now, even though the whole war on terrorism is a fabrication. It's a phony, concocted military strategy. And indeed, terrorism is a form of warfare. So, the war on terror is an oxymoron. You can't have a war on war unless you want permanent war, which, of course, the military industrial complex does want. So last time we were going through an article which I put together for this interview, which is on my gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com. If people go to the gangstalking tab, because this could happen to you folks, you might want to get apprised of it. And I put together an article called The Inferred Functions and Goals of Gog's New Gestapo, Global Organized Gang Stalking Operations. And this is kind of a first draft of a preliminary assessment of how does this program benefit elites. And we were just last time talking about an author by the name of Marshall Thomas's book called Monarch, the New Phoenix Program. I had quoted extensively from Marshall Thomas. I guess it's going to be kind of welded. This interview is going to be welded with the earlier one, so I won't have to say it again. But I was using his description of the Phoenix program as the late 60s, early 70s CIA program to disable and dismantle and neutralize the civilian population of Vietnam in the Vietnam War so that the US could prevail. And of course, they had all kinds of euphemisms like, well, we're going to win the hearts and minds of the people. And these are peacekeeping operations. Well, what they were doing is they're torturing and murdering people wholesale, about 50,000 of them. The CIA would make up the lists of potentially influential people, hand it to the military. The military would go kill them, like as in Lieutenant Calley and the My Lai massacre, and many others conducted by our own senators, John Kerry and the other Kerry, Bob Kerry, and many of our Vietnam vets have participated in the Phoenix program. And but see, that's only half of it. What about the Monarch part? He's saying Monarch is the new Phoenix program. And he's saying the Phoenix program is being directed now against the American civilian population, much like, it was directed against the Vietnamese civilian population in order to subdue all potential dissenting voices. Well, let's talk now for a second about Monarch. What is Monarch, and how could that be the new Phoenix program? And believe me, this is not obvious. You have to really dig in to begin to put these pieces together. Well, Monarch is the military operational use of the MK Ultra, Bluebird, Artichoke, MK Search, MK Off, and MK Delta, whole series of top secret mind control programs, really starting at the end of World War II and then continuing on till the present. So Monarch is how they operationally use this information to program human beings to do, and this is always in the CIA, at the introduction, we want to find ways to get people to do our bidding, even if it's against their self-interest, and even if it's against their sense of self-preservation. In other words, to turn somebody into our slave, our robot. And now they have the means of doing this electronically with the non-lethal weapons and all the knowledge they gained from these top secret programs, which, as we mentioned last time, really are inherited from the Nazis. And the Nazis inherited it from the Illuminati families who've been doing this to their own kids, believe it or not, using satanic ritual abuse for hundreds of years. Okay, so let's look at the levels of Monarch programming. This comes from an article by Ron Patton, 1999, called Project Monarch, Nazi Mind Control. He says, here are the different levels of Monarch programming. So depending on their need for you, they'll give you these different new identities. Alpha programming is regarded as general or regular programming within the base control personality, characterized by extremely pronounced memory retention, along with substantially increased physical strength and visual acuity. Okay, there's our super soldiers. Alpha programming is accomplished through deliberately subdividing the victim's personality. This is the trauma-based mind control that causes multiple personality disorder or dissociative identity disorder, which in essence causes a left brain, right brain division, allowing for a programmed union of left and right through neuron pathway stimulation. These guys have really done a lot of work on this. So that's alpha. Beta is referred to as sexual programming. These are our beta sex kittens. This programming eliminates all learned moral convictions and stimulates the primitive sexual instinct devoid of inhibitions. Cat alters may come out at this level. And here we have the Marilyn Monroes. And what's the lady you mentioned, Freeman?
Anna Nicole.
Anna Nicole, yeah, many examples. Britney Spears, etc. Kids who get started with the Disney, Walt Disney, may well go through this along their career. Unfortunately, I mean, this is horrendous stuff. I laugh about it. It's not funny at all. Delta, this is known as killer programming, originally developed for training special agents or elite soldiers, Delta Force, 1st Earth Battalion, Mossad, etc., in covert operations. Optimal adrenal output and controlled aggression is evident. Subjects are devoid of fear, very systematic in carrying out their assignment. Self-destruct or suicide instructions are layered in at this level. By the way, if people want to watch the Jason Bourne series, all of them are good, but the best one, I think, is the Bourne Legacy. We could talk about later. Then there's Theta, which is considered to be psychic programming. This is coming directly from Ron Patton's article. I'm just reading this. He says, blood linings, this is coming from 1999. Bloodliners, those coming from multi-generational satanic families, were determined to exhibit a greater propensity for having telepathic abilities than did non-bloodliners. But by the way, they're both slaves. So you got your hierarchical slaves. That's the bloodliners, and then you got the non-hierarchical slaves. Those are others. Due to its evident limitations, however, various forms of electronic mind control systems were developed and introduced, namely, and listen carefully here, biomedical human telemetry devices, brain implants. Okay, Jose Delgado had invented the stimoceiver back in the 60s, and then they've been using implants for many decades, and now they don't even need them anymore with the nanotechnology that is in all our neural pathways coming from the chemtrails. They also use directed energy lasers. Okay, here's our non-lethal weapons, using microwaves and or electromagnetics. This is a 1999 article. It is reported these are used in conjunction with highly advanced computers and sophisticated satellite tracking systems. Okay, now all of this is involved in the gang stalking operations. This is the components of it. As we perhaps remember from the quote that I started this interview with on Tuesday from Dr. Ronnie Kilda. Let me read that again just real quickly because it's so important. Dr. Ronnie Kilda, by the way, she died after 30 years of being harassed in this program. She was murdered. She was the chief medical officer of Northern Finland, Lapland. Her husband was a UN representative of Norway. So they were political insiders. They would have gone to many globalist meetings, and she gave papers at military mind control conferences. Here's what she says, and she wrote papers for these things. She says, this global organized gang stalking, or what I'm calling Gog's new Gestapo, is the most important policy of the United States. With this invisible and silent weapon, they can control people and populations, biological and electronic systems via space satellites. The elite have plans to get rid of 2/3 of the world's population with electromagnetic warfare, chemical warfare, and psychological warfare. Mind control is listed as a non-lethal weapon by the military and is a weapon of mass destruction, along with nuclear bombs. So this is the warfare of the 21st century. This technology links the brains of people via implanted microchips, used to be, now they don't need them, to satellites controlled by ground-based supercomputers. There are the elements again for all the gang stalking programs. They were used in the theta programming of these monarch slaves. According to CIA director in 1972, mind control means a world where every thought, emotion, observation, and need is controlled. Well, it was Jose Delgado, the CIA psychiatrist, who wrote a book, about electrical stimulation of the brain toward a psycho-civilized society. So the CIA supported these people to develop ways to, turn us into zombie slaves, and then, of course, genocide large numbers of us. So bottom line, it becomes very self-evident that our cryptocracy, the rule by secrecy, the intelligence agencies, in concert with the military and our, political, many of them being mind-controlled robots themselves, that they have sold out of the American population. Okay, so theta programming, psychic programming, I just went through Ron Patton's definition. Now I'll go to the next one, which is omega programming, a self-destruct form of programming, also known as code green. See, when they layer in these alter personalities, they put in a personality structure, often relating back to the Jewish Kabbalah system of Satanism and black magic. They'll have like a castle. They're working on programming young children who, they're 6 or less, and they tell the child, okay, you got a castle inside, and we're going to put this person in that room, and this alter identity in that room, and this devil is going to go in that room, and this animal is going to go in that room. And the kid believes this. So, the child. And so the programming of children, this is how they used to do it. Now they can do it electronically. And as I understand it, they don't necessarily have to have children anymore. So they've made, great strides in mind control since they started these top secret programs back in the 40s and 50s. And okay, the code green corresponding behaviors include suicidal tendencies or self-mutilation if the person starts to realize what's going on and starts to come out of their programming. So this says the program is generally activated when the victim survivor begins therapy or interrogation and too much memory is being recovered. And then there's lastly the gamma programming, another form of system protection through deception programming, which elicits misinformation and misdirection. This level is intertwined with demonology and tends to regenerate itself at a later time if inappropriately deactivated. Okay, so Freeman, this is all a long way to try to get to the question is, how could Marshall Thomas entitle his book Monarch, the New Phoenix Program? How can we put these two together? Maybe I'll throw it back to you. Does that seem obvious to you, or does that seem like a head scratcher?
Well, honestly, I hadn't heard enough about the Phoenix program. Strangely enough, it's amazing how forthright MK Ultra is at this point, and the Monarch programming. It's part of television shows and movies. It's openly discussed, and but I'm not. I mean, when you were saying about what was going on in Vietnam, I understood what you were saying about the Phoenix program. And yeah, I mean, it would just simply become the more global aspect of these test runs.
Okay, well, let me put it this way. Okay, let's say you are the CIA or the now Department of Homeland Security in concert with the FBI, and it's your task to generate a list of people who are going to be the targets, viable targets, according to neuroscientist Dr. James Giordano, who gave a talk at Lawrence Livermore Lab in 2017. He's a Georgetown University neuroscientist. He says we need viable targets, to do our testing and whatnot. So, but what are we going to do to these targets? Well, we're going to use a whole series of these technologies in experimental situations. We're going to try this, try that, and try the other, see what we can do with them. Well, if we do the Monarch programming to these targets, we might have the advantage of, okay, here was a person who was a dissident, maybe a truth teller. Now we give them some Monarch programming, and now we have turned the dissident into our own slave, haven't we? Because now we have a mind-controlled robot based on the programming. So what Marshall Thomas is suggesting with his title, Monarch, the New Phoenix Program, is that the military-industrial intelligence corporate complex has the wherewithal to target individuals who are, for whatever reason, deemed not suitable as they are, and to transform them into robot slaves of the state as assets. Now they're assets, you see. Before they were a pain in the butt. Now they're an asset. Can you see how evil that is?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And that is the thing, folks. And Dr. Karlstrom, we're going to have to wrap up this first hour and get back to this topic. I have so much that I want to say, and I don't want to start any new topics at this moment because, well, this first hour is done. Without a doubt, this has risen to the surface. This concept is here. It's part of our culture now. It is a story, an effect that happens invisibly. That, as you can see from even my example, that the consequence of sharing this information with someone other than on a podcast such as this and talking with your friends, you're going to get two results, it seems. One is, oh, just take it easy. And the other is, I'm not getting anywhere near you. So these are the plight. This is the plight of the targeted individual. There's no way for them to define what's happening. There's no way for them to make you believe what is happening. And if they do manage to make you believe, you're just going to be afraid of them. And we have now watching all of these very monarch, just as Dr. Karlstrom has explained in Ron Patton's article there. Ron Patton, also a very good friend of this show. We're witnessing all of this. I mean, we're seeing every aspect of the alpha, beta, gamma, theta, omega situation as we watch the pedophilia come to the surface. Everyone's now aware of that. Now it's going full born. We're watching the suicides of our icons left and right as they drop off. And it just so happens that they seem to be working on trying to stop this sex trafficking of children. And you know, I just came across someone saying there's a documentary called The Secret Children, Silent Children, and this was two of the suicides that just happened with oh, why am I losing all my names in this situation as I try to wrap this up? Look into this. It's in my Twitter feed. If you're not following me on Twitter, you should, because all the articles in there go along with everything that we're discussing, and you'll get a lot more information out of that. But without a doubt, we are seeing this rise to the surface. We are seeing it just being put out there for everyone. And nurture, as we learned from Kathy O'Brien, is the only cure that we have for this modern mind control. But as Tesla and well, Elon Musk is launching all of his CubeSats on his Dragon spacecraft, and we can see the satanic heralding of all these implementations without question. We can see satanic ritual abuse, satanic influence into all of what we are witnessing here. And it's just undeniable at this point. So what do we do? This is something what we're going to get into in the next hour. And I have much to talk about in the situations that have occurred trying to get this topic out to the public. And I want to also thank Steve Mercer as my associate producer. Just so you guys know, Steve Mercer is the one that brings me all these amazing guests like Dr. Karlstrom. And I just don't mention him very much because I don't want to put a target on him, right? So I had to wait for him to acknowledge that he did want to be mentioned, because this is a dangerous occupation we're in. And I don't target anyone without their suggesting they want it. So Steve, here you go. Steve Mercer is the associate producer here at the Free Zone and has been for years now. And I've just kept him behind the scenes because, well, I didn't want to throw a target on him. And I also want to let you know that those glow-in-the-dark t-shirts, glow-in-the-dark cat t-shirts are flying out. I sold out of all the large. I got a few mediums left, but they're a great way to open these conversations with people. I just had it happen at the post office where I was wearing my glow-in-the-dark cat t-shirt, and I brought up, you know, glow-in-the-dark cats, pigs, and sheep. And it started this whole conversation in the post office. All of a sudden, everybody around me was chiming in. Yeah, I think I would grow human body parts inside of a sheep. You know, we had this full conversation going on just from this t-shirt. So I went ahead and ordered a bunch more, guys, in all different sizes because people wanted more sizing. So there is another run of the glow-in-the-dark cats t-shirt coming, just so you know. They sold out in a day, guys. That blew my mind. Thank you so much, because I don't make much off of it, but it helps support the show. But even more so, it helps spark these conversations while you guys are out, you know, spreading the word. So Pick up your glow-in-the-dark cat t-shirt. I got a few mediums left. I'll let you know as soon as the rest come in. I want to say thank you, Dr. Karlstrome, for coming into this situation and taking on the dangers of putting this topic out, and as tirelessly as you are.
Well, absolutely. It's my obligation and pleasure, Freeman. I realized in 2013 that I was a targeted individual. And of course, this has been a big part of my motivation to learn about it and to share that information with others. They don't send you a letter. We've now put you on the terrorism watch list and decided we're going to harass you in the street and zap you with electronic weapons. No, these things just start happening, and you at first have no idea what's going on. What you do see is that your life is starting to unravel. Your friends and your family are distancing themselves from you, and there's a whole series of things that happen. And a lot of people, I believe, who are targets never figure it out, and they might commit suicide without ever knowing. So I think it's very important for us to talk about these things. And based on Marshall Thomas's statement that I read earlier Tuesday, I mean, they plan on rolling this out to the whole world. I mean, this is a genocidal weapon. And so we, as a populace, presumably we own the United States, right? Constitution says we do. We have to get a grip on our government and these genocidal technologies before it's too late. So, thank you for your courage. And really, my feeling is I don't have any choice but to tell the truth and spread it as widely as I can. And I have now the complete free hand to do that. It's an imperative for me to tell the truth on these things.
Absolutely, I am right there with you. It's I don't have a choice, and it seems the universe picked me as the vessel, and I guess I'm good at it. So I want to thank you guys all for tuning in every week for all of this madness and for sharing this information with everyone. If you're not signed up now, get on over to freemantv.com and subscribe to get all the bonus hours that are there and all the extras that are there. And if you're not even a member, get over to freemantv.com and explore the 13 years that this show has been running, and realize that many of these topics came up first right here. And you will get to the heart and the bottom and the base, the first bone, as it were, of these very topics. So don't be afraid to dig in. Feel free to dig deep and get all these shows. And of course, get over to Dr. Eric Karlstrome's websites and the numerous sites that we have here as we get on to gangstalkingmindcontrolcults.com, 911nwo.com, and of course, naturalclimatechange.org. And of course, everything is linked right here on freemantv.com for you. So thank you all again, and we will see you next week.